The second thing is making sure our process is dialed in. If our process is not dialed in, there's going to be awkward pauses. There's going to be these times where they're questioning if they should be on the phone with us. They're questioning our credibility. They're judging us just like, how we kind of judge their situation of where we should put them. They're judging whether or not we're the right person that they want to do business with. If they're really going to trust us. So we have to make sure that number one, we're not letting them talk about random things. Number two, or we give them a little space here and there to make them feel good, to make them know that we're listening, but we got to know when it's time to cut that off. Hey, I'm going to verify this really quickly. They just have me reaching out for this reason, right? Boom, real quick, verify that, get back on track. Ask a question that's leading them down the path where we need them to go. Not asking them about, the weather, the news, or the movie they watched last night, right? The important things. Let them talk about those things. Second thing, the process. We got to make sure that our process is dialed in. We got to make sure our script is dialed in. We got to make sure we're communicating with these people the right way because they are judging us. And if we're not on our game, if we're not A players to them, they're not going to do business with us. So make sure these are controllables too, guys. If you're newer, practice a lot. I was just telling some people in here, like, just read your script 3 times in the morning before you start dialing. If you do that for 21 days in a row, that's 3 weeks. Like, dude, you're going to be 10 times farther along and so much more confident. And sometimes it's just that feeling, right? Sometimes when we go into a presentation, and if I haven't done it a lot or I haven't spoken about this stuff a lot, I might just be kind of nervous because it's new, right? I'm like, and this is option 1 and option 2. And then they're like, man, why does this guy sound so uncomfortable presenting this stuff to me? Like, this is weird. Like, I don't know if I want to say yes now. But if we're just like, yeah, here's option 1, here's what it's going to look like. This is option 2. This is how much it costs. This is what it's going to fulfill for you. Little Susie's not going to have to worry about anything. Which one makes more sense? All right. So much better. And that's just an internal thing. And so I think that for a lot of us, these are 2 areas very controllable for us that if I wanted to get better tomorrow, these are the things that I would start being conscious of, just making sure that we have dialed in. Make sure that you're not letting people over talk you and walk you down their path. Make sure that just like we are calling leads and they are a lead to us, they are also looking for who they're going to choose to do business with. And we want to make sure that we're that person for them. So don't let them judge you poorly because that's in our control. So be that perfect person for them. Make sure that we have our process dialed in, come across as that professional, and make sure that you're not giving them all this, these awkward spaces and times during the conversation, because what happens is they judge us and they go, this guy is kind of giving me some room. I don't know. I'm just going to do this tomorrow. Right. And then they kind of back themselves out of it almost. So number 3, guys, I want to talk a little bit about, like I said, the kind of the presentation, right? And so I'm going to use a mortgage protection example, and then I'm going to use a final expense example, and I'm just going to use a general life insurance example. So for mortgage protection, I've told this story to a couple of you guys. I've called somebody before and they say, I say, have you looked into this before? They got their mortgage 5-10 years ago or something along the lines of that. And they're like, yeah, we've looked into it, but people just tried to get us life insurance. And we didn't want a whole life insurance policy for $20,000. We didn't want that. We want mortgage protection, right? So they want the concept of mortgage protection. So my job as the professional is to find them a solution, which ultimately that person couldn't qualify for term. So we were looking at a whole life plan through America. And we got them the Eagle Premier final expense policy that we use, but I called it equity protection. And I explained how it's going to benefit their family and how they're going to be able to save the equity. And rather than them having to give the house back to the bank, lose the $100,000 in equity, you're going to take this plan. It's going to save the equity. It's called equity protection. Here's how we're going to use it. Your wife is now going to have $20,000, which is 14 months of mortgage payments that they're not going to have to worry about, where they can take the time to clean the house up, clean it out, fix whatever they have to fix, make sure it's presentable to put it on the market. Now you have 14 months to be able to do it. That's how equity protection works. And that's the program that we're going to be looking at for you. It's a concept. Do you see the difference? They didn't want life insurance. They wanted the concept of mortgage protection. I just had to walk them through how they're going to use it. And so just like that in mortgage protection, I can do the same thing with final expense. You guys ever talk to somebody, for people who have been making calls on here, and you say life insurance and people are like, oh, I don't want that. They want final expense coverage. It's life insurance. The solution is life insurance, but they want the concept. So if they say that, I say, yeah, no worries at all. We'll look at those final expense programs for you. I just wanted to make sure I had a good idea of where you wanted to go. Right. And then when I present, I explain, and so I'm going to back up a couple steps. I like to ask questions in my process, whether it's final expense or mortgage, to figure out what's important to them and what they actually want. So if they're like, I want, the mortgage to be covered, I'm like, okay, awesome. Right. And then I'll ask some questions about their equity. And then I know that their equity is important to them because six figures of dollars is a lot of money. And they want to make sure that they can have that rather than it going back to the bank. Okay. So I know that that is important to them. Now, on top of that, I can spin that now that I know that's important to them to present to them. The presentation is so important. I can spin the presentation to make the words make sense to them of what they're getting. Because if it doesn't make sense to them in their perception, it's not going to make sense for them to say yes to. So same policy, like I said, that person had been presented in the past is the same thing that we got them. But because I presented it differently, it made sense to them. They said yes, right? So just like in final expense, I'm going to ask questions. Were you looking for a cremation or a burial? How much does that cost? Does your family member have the money to be able to pay for that? Right there, I just gathered enough information to understand what their perception of the situation is. Cremation or burial? Burial. How much does that cost? $15,000. Does your family member have the money to pay for that out of pocket? No. I know that when I present this solution, I need to mention how it's going to cover the burial, how it's going to total the amount of the total cost that they told me it was. That's option one, right? And now they know that instead of me just saying, hey, this is a $15,000 policy, it's going to pay out to your family member. No, this is going to cover exactly what you told me the problem was. And it's going to pay out a tax-free check for them and solve that. So they told me the whole issue, and I can present that in a way that's going to make it make sense to them. But if I don't ask those questions up in the front end, how much does that cost? What are you looking for? Then I'm blindly throwing darts, right? I'm like hoping that something sticks. So I got to ask the questions up front to get the information to figure out how to present it the proper way. So with mortgage, I always say this, right? We're using our resources to put this client in the best possible situation. I know that deep down in my heart, I presented the same thing that those other people did to them. But because I took the time to walk them through the solution, to walk them through how it's going to be beneficial for their family, that it is beneficial for them. I just had to explain it the proper way. And it's what separates a good salesperson from a normal salesperson. And so just by doing that, I got someone to say yes, right? Now, on top of that, with final expense, if someone tells me that their burial's $20,000, then I know that I'm going to try to present something that's in that range. And if they can't afford that, I'm going to present a $15,000 option, and I'm going to explain why that's better than nothing, right? I'm going to make it make sense to them. But if I don't ask those questions up front, my presentation doesn't follow what they're telling me they're looking for. It has to follow what they're telling me they're looking for. So through the process, if someone says, I really just want to make sure my family members aren't in a tight spot. Okay, how would they be in a tight spot? Tell me about that. Well, they're going to have to pay for this and I don't want them to come out of pocket. Okay, do they have the money to pay for that now? Like, do you have anything set up where that's going to get taken care of now? And they're like, no. Okay. So I know that we're probably looking at X amount of dollars in insurance is what they want. And they don't want a life insurance policy for it. They want their problems to go away. And we have the ability to provide that. And sometimes they don't, we need to know as the salesperson and the pro how to present that based off the information that they're telling us. So, and I kind of like, I'm trying to not go too deep on the, I don't want you guys to overthink it and be like, it's a lot of questions. It's kind of a lot. Like, I got to present this concept. Like, just talk to them. Like, just ask them questions. Just ask them questions on their situation. If you go through the script and you see how the questions are labeled, like those are the questions generally of what to ask. But, we're trying to get them to paint their own picture, right? And if I don't do that, then I'm not going to have the information I need to present the right thing.